we have here FAST, and FAST stands for fair, no apologies, stick to values, and be truthful. And this is a keeping your self-respect skill. This is, how do I say no to this person, right, who maybe is putting a lot of pressure on me, and I'm so afraid of losing the relationship that I do something that's against my wise mind values, right, what the rights and wrongs I live my life by, and then I feel horrible afterwards, right? So how do I say no to something, keep my self-respect, and don't end the relationship as well, okay? So that's by being fair. I don't have to apologize for my values, right? I don't have to say, I'm sorry, but I don't smoke pot. I just get to say, no thank you, right? I don't have to apologize. I get to stick to my values, and I get to tell the truth. I don't have to say, oh, I would go and smoke pot with you, but my great aunt is super sick. She just had her leg cut off. I mean, I don't have to do all of that stuff. I just get to say, I get to stick to my values and say, I'm not into that, right? And so we teach them how to do that. Dear man is our skill for asking assertively for something we want, right? So the D stands for describe the situation. Okay, it express my emotion, how I feel about the situation, assertively ask for what I want and need in the situation, reinforce my asking in some way, and in the midst of all of that, I'm going to stay mindful of my goals. I'm not going to get sidetracked. I'm going to appear confident even if I'm not, and I'm going to be willing to negotiate. What we teach our kids is be willing to give to get. Okay? And we talk a lot about middle path. Okay? We do tons of role plays. We do tons of in vivo stuff. Like if a kid says they want something or they want some sort of special programming, we'll have them write out a Dear Man. The big thing in Willow is everyone wants to change roommates every 5 minutes. Right? I hate her, I can't be her roommate, I want a new roommate. And so one of the processes that we've put in place is you have to do a Dear Man for a roommate. So they'll actually write out their Dear Man, we'll review it and either accept it, or we'll say, you need to do a better job on this Dear Man. Okay. So an example of a Dear Man, I'll do real quickly, might be, hey, I noticed that you've been home late for dinner 3 times this week. So I'm describing the situation without judgment, without emotion, just the facts. I notice that you haven't been home on time for dinner 3 times this week. And then I'm going to express how I feel about it, right? I really feel sad when you're not home for dinner. I'd really like or prefer you to have dinner with us, right? Those are both emotions. And then I'm going to say, so what I'd like for you to do is be more mindful of time when you're, in the afternoon, so that you can be here at 6 when we sit down and have dinner. Okay, and then I'm going to reinforce it by either saying, I really appreciate it if you would do that, right? Or I can reinforce it by saying, and if you're not home, if you're more than a half an hour late, I'll probably start calling around to try and find you. Okay, so I'm reinforcing it by saying, this is what I'll do if you're not willing, right? Most of the time we teach our kids to say, and I'd really appreciate it. Right? It would mean a lot to me if I could get this request, okay? And we do a lot about talking about what it takes to appear confident, what a confident body posture looks like versus an unconfident or non-confident body posture. Okay, so we're going to talk about session strategies. And the number one session strategy is validation. So even in the most difficult situations, even in the thing that makes no sense, or mostly makes no sense, there's something to validate. And we know what our targets for validation are, right? We get to validate emotion all the time, every day. And even if it's secondary emotion, we can at least say, I see that you're really angry. That's a fact. I'm not going to deny that what I'm seeing in front of me is anger. I'm guessing that there's something underneath that too. Okay? We can validate effort. We can validate approximations of behavior. Good job calming down in 20 minutes. It used to take you an hour. Nicely done. It's not all the way I want to be, but I want to notice it's better, right? So I'm going to validate approximations of behavior. There are levels of validation that go from just making eye contact and leaning in and those kinds of things to the biggest validation, which is that makes perfect sense, right? As well as the one under that, which is the me too validation, right? So they come in and says, I hate when my boss, changes his mind about something at the last minute. And I say, me too, I hate that too, right? That's very validating, right? It makes them feel like they're normal, and if that's a normative response to something. Change strategies. So as we said, we are negotiating between acceptance and change on all of our, in all of our sessions and interactions. And so when we're looking at the primary target on the chain, we want to make sure that we are noticing all aspects of the chain and talking about all the ways in which they can break that chain. If we can't break it at primary emotion by allowing it and self-validating it, then let's try it at judgments. We know we have another opportunity as soon as our judgment starts, right? And I can learn to think of things in a non-judgmental way, so that will help bring my emotion down. So we want to make sure we're giving attention to all aspects of the chain. We want to give attention to secondary targets throughout session, okay? So a secondary target might be, we have our hierarchy, and the number one hierarchy is life-threatening behaviors and treatment-interfering behaviors, right? And maybe a secondary target for them is, hey, I need to ask my mom if they'll buy me a dress for the prom. Can you help me with that? Well, of course I want to help them with that, right? That's going to build relationship with them. That can help them be very adaptive. And I'm going to do that after we've hit the primary target, which would be their self-harm or their treatment-interfering behavior. But I do want to pay attention to those secondary targets as well. We want to weave in solutions as skills. Skills as solutions, I think that's supposed to say. And solutions that are developed collaboratively, right? So it's never, I don't know about you, but I don't respond as well to, here's what you should do, go do it, right? As well as I respond to something like, hey, have you ever considered trying to maybe gently avoid them? Or have you ever thought about what would be different if you expressed your primary emotion instead of expressing your anger? Have you ever, do you see how that's more collaborative, and I'm creating options? I'm not dictating their behavior to them, I'm just creating options. So being more collaborative is always better than just saying, and I get on coaches all the time in our hospital because I'll hear them say, use your skills. It's like, that's not coaching. Telling someone what the target is not coaching. Coaching is saying, hey, what if we take a walk right now? Let's go to the cafe and get something cold to drink, right? I'm creating an option for them that they can say yes or no to, right? And it's skillful, it's adaptive, right? So I'm creating an option for them. I'm not telling them, you have to come with me and go to the cafe and get a cold drink, okay? Which is very non-collaborative. So when we're balancing acceptance and change strategies, a good rule of thumb is if their dysregulation keeps going up, no matter what you say or do, you're probably leaning too hard on change. And that's my weakness. I lean too hard on change, right? So when I notice that what I'm saying is making things worse, the rule is cease and desist, okay? So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to switch to validation. So this is really hard for you. Tell me what's upsetting you right now, right? If you're leaning too hard on validation or too much on validation when your patient isn't experiencing any distress in session with you. You are validating them so much that they don't have to feel or experience or work through anything, right? So if there's no emotion, if there's no tension, if there's no problem, right, you may be leaning too hard on validation. And the problem with that is then we're removing the problem for them. We're coping, we're regulating them. They are not regulating themselves. So we don't want to lean too far in either direction. And it's being mindful about the signs that you may be leaning too far in one direction or too far in the other. So some of our blocking strategies, we talk about blocking patients give us is usually they're trying to distract us from the fire by getting us to notice the smoke, right? So maybe the problem is they cut themselves and all they want to talk about is how horrible their parents are, right? And so we want to be able to block that. So we can block by ignoring, right? We can ignore what they've just said and say, so let's get back to the chain, right? We're just doing a chain on this. What was your primary emotion when that happened, right? So we can block by just ignoring the distraction or the attempt to avoid. We can use irreverent communication. And Dr. Frizzetti is really good at irreverent communication. I saw him at a conference one time. There was a parent who stood up and said, I have a right to my anger. I have a right to be angry about this. And Dr. Frizzetti's response was, of course you do. You also have the right to roll around in shit if you want to. I don't recommend it, but you have the right to it, right? That's irreverence, okay? And it helps when you really need to get their attention. It's very helpful when you need to get their attention and they go, and you get to bring them back then, right? And often when you do irreverence, it falls flat, because if we're not careful and we're not skillful, it just comes out as sarcastic and hurtful, right? And so Linda Demeff, who's another DBT guru, who's a cohort of Marshall Linehan, teaches that you kind of got to run to the other end of the room and see how that irreverence was received, right? And if you receive it as being off, then you just do a repair immediately and say, you know, you really needed to get your attention, right? Because here's the fire. This is the fire. There's a lot of metaphors in DBT. And you're wanting me to stay over here and notice the smoke. That's not going to be helpful. You need to put out the fire, right? So I needed to bring you back, get your attention so I could bring you back to this. This is what we got to talk about. It's really hard. This is really hard stuff. We can do extending or matching. I had a coach who told me a story one time in the unit. There was a kid who realized that his roommate was wearing his underwear. He was completely freaked out, and he wanted to beat this kid up. He was so mad. And so we have texts in between them, right, because the other kid's wanting to come right back to him too. They're adolescent boys. And the tech, who had a really good relationship with this kid, was saying, hey, look at me, notice me, come on, I need you to notice me. He goes, he's wearing my underwear. And she said, and that sucks. She met his arousal where it was at, and he just came right down, because she got it. So when we match their level of arousal very precisely and for a good reason, right, that can help bring them down. Because we're showing that we get it. We're matching their emotional level. Okay. Extending just means if they say you're doing sort of the pros and cons of something, and they've listed some cons, we might add one or two. We might extend that into something that they're not thinking about yet. If we're doing, let's say we're talking about self-harm, and we're saying, so what do you think is going to happen if nothing changes with this? Well, you know, I'm going to have a lot of scars. And I might extend by saying, and you could accidentally kill yourself someday. Right, so I'm going to extend. That's a strategy as well. We can enter the paradox and use and instead of but. And so the way I learned this in CBT was rolling with the resistance, right? And so it's sort of like, I'm not going to go toe-to-toe with someone and say, you have no idea what you're talking about, or that is so ineffective, or any of those things. I'm just going to join in, whether I just kind of silently agree, at least I'm not overtly disagreeing, and I'm going to use and, right? So it's like with the parent who said, my anger is justified, I have every right to my anger, and your anger can make things worse, right? Right? So that would be an example of entering the paradox. I'm not going to oppose him or get in a power struggle with him, and I'm going to show him the other side of it as well.